Hey everybody, it's John with National Sports Entertainment, and I think I figured out at least a temporary storage solution. So this video, finally I can go into depth like I've been wanting to and not kind of just rush through things. So if you saw the last few videos, basically, we didn't have a ton of action. We had the Bears game where we liked the Bears, but then we changed it to the Commanders. We had Temple last night, and the Guardians got postponed. So again, all I did there was just rebet that. So it's 16 to win 20. I'm just doing 20 on this because I have a feeling some of these might go to like the third leg, just because they're going to want to make these series interesting, and it's hard to tell exactly where the public money is. I think there's going to be more public money on the Yankees, but the reason the Guardians aren't getting the best odds is probably because they have a pitcher who's portrayed well, and again, they're at home. And then I do like this game, SMU. I went over minus 12.5. That's to win 25. Again, it's the receiver Rice, Rashee Rice. He's like the best receiver in college football. Had a bad week last week on prime time. And that was against the team it was UCF. They're trying to make UCF look pretty good. But in a game where they're going to win this game, I believe, by a good margin, that's where you make him look good. So it just makes sense. It's going to be on ESPN. It makes sense he goes off for like 3 touchdowns. So those are our picks. And like I said, I'm going to go into more of the baseball ones and things of that nature. But I wanted to keep this specified on the 16 different teams for each conference and where I think they're going to end up. So I did briefly touch on the East, and I'll touch on them again because I understand that one I didn't get to touch on too much. But here are my categories if you saw the first video. If you didn't, you'll be able to do it fresh. I have the basement dwellers, and these are the teams that are as advertised. There's no narratives really, there's no draws. They will job and will have the occasional spoil. And if you can see, I had Washington in this list, and they met that criteria perfectly tonight. They were garbage, but they spoiled enough because more public money was on Chicago. So, and they had a little bit of a narrative with their running back. So, as you can see, I still have Washington finishing last in the East, just because that's the category that I think that they belong in. And we'll just hit the categories. I think it'll make it better that way. So next I had New England. I went over them in the last video, but again, to me, New England is another team that's going to finish last. They're going to have the occasional spoil like they did against covering that Green Bay spread. They might win at home against a team that people aren't expecting. I don't think many people would expect. I don't know who they play, but let's say it's the Chargers or something like that. I could see them spoiling a game like that. So I can certainly see them playing that role, but I think they win the same amount of wins as Bill Belichick did in his first season with the Browns. I think would be fitting, and I think he went 5-11. So next we have Pittsburgh, and really not much I need to say about this. Again, just like Belichick, the Tomlin era is coming to an end, and they might have him rebuild some guys and get to an even record by a year or two, but this is not going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers that people are used to seeing. I think when Ben left, and even before Ben left, they didn't have much of a draw. Pittsburgh, they had a much bigger market. There's a guy, Sean Sweeney. He does this. He's always on my channel talking about Pittsburgh and other teams, but he does videos on Pittsburgh. He could probably tell you about Pittsburgh's market and how it's nowhere near what it used to be. So they're basement dwellers. There's nothing going to happen with them. Again, occasional spoil. Houston, same thing. They got Lovie Smith, and again, Lovie's probably there so he can get these guys acting good and get them, ready for a year or two. But they're not going to do anything. I expect them to maybe get a game or two against the Titans or a team like the Titans. But outside of that, I just don't see it. Washington, I just went over. Arizona, now, a few people did bring up to me the fact that people do like Kyler Murray. Arizona is a pretty nice market still, and they've been competitive. So maybe they're not basement dwellers. maybe they're sleepers or just a different category, or even in the hunt. I chose to put Seattle in the hunt just off the way they're being portrayed, though I could definitely see swapping Arizona and Seattle and making Seattle the basement dwellers. I think both of them are not going to make the playoffs. I think Seattle's just going to be shown more for its physicality, and they do still have Metcalf and some nice players, I believe, and Geno's doing some okay things. I think they're going to want to show Kyler Murray off, but I think they're going to take another year or two before they really get him going. I think this is like his first real year, I think, where they're testing him. So I don't see him doing much, but maybe he does. Atlanta and Carolina, I have them both as basement dwellers. Yes, I know there can't be two. Well, I guess they could tie, but neither of these teams have narratives. Neither of these. When Patterson got hurt was when I officially said, okay, Atlanta's not even going to be an in the hunt type of team. And I didn't really think so anyway, but that solidified that for me. This will be a two-way race where the Bucs lose games they shouldn't to keep the Saints-Bucs primetime matchup where Jameis Winston goes against his old team that much more lucrative. And I also think that the Saints could be one of those teams that might sneak into the playoffs. Not saying they do, but to finish off the basement dwellers, we have Detroit. And again, it's kind of like Pittsburgh. Not much else needs to be said. As bad as the Bears are, you can just tell because of Fields and other players on the team that they're going to be pushed, and they're going to finish at least, I think, 2 or 3 wins ahead of the Lions. So again, by knowing this, we will know which against the spread teams carry more value. Because Detroit finishing 2-14 against the spread or 2-15 against the spread is very possible, to be quite honest. It happens with really, really shitty teams. They're like the 1 or 2 outliers. But for a team, and we'll move on to the next list, like Buffalo, to finish with that record against the spread it just doesn't happen. So here's the red herrings, and I want to cover them. So, and like I said, I was going to do it by division, but I think it's better to do it by category, and you'll see them fall into place as we hit them. So we know Houston's a bottom dweller, Carolina, Atlanta, we know Pittsburgh, Detroit, etc. Now, red herring, I think these teams will be pushed like they can win a title no matter what their record is. They will serve as decoys, and there's going to be narratives. They're going to be the talk of the league. So I think of honestly, the first 5 on this list is all, if you think about the narratives, these 5 guys are the talk of the league. We have Buffalo with Josh Allen, and obviously him in Kansas City. This is the new Brady and Mahomes. So they're going to set that up, deal with it. That's what we're getting for the next 6 to 10 years, which is fine. It makes it easier to pick. Russell, will he do good? Will he not? He's going to be the talk of the league, and until they're mathematically eliminated, and of course they're not going to let that happen anytime soon. And then Aaron and Tom, just like every year, they'll make it into the playoffs, and then when they get into the playoffs, what are they going to do? The Rams, they'll be kept around because they're a Super Bowl team winner, and even if they're not playing well, they're going to be pitched as a Super Bowl team because they have Wagner now. A lot of people just look at players. They don't look at how teams have changed. And Philly, just because they have a great record and Hurts is doing really well. Now, the reason I have all of these teams as red herrings is because I think, A, there's too much public money on Buffalo, Philadelphia now, Tampa, Green Bay, Kansas City, etc. I think there's too much public money on these teams. Not that the public money doesn't win. Public money wins Super Bowls a lot. But the other reason is because I genuinely think they want to set up a Brady and Manning, which would have to be Buffalo and Kansas City meeting and one knocking the other out. And I think it's going to be Mahomes knocking Allen out. I know it's 2 years in a row. Everyone's expecting redemption. Don't forget, it took Manning a long time to get redemption. So I think that's what they're doing. I think they're going to keep Kansas City strong. But again, I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl for the AFC. I think too much public money's on them. They are my second choice. If my first choice doesn't make it, then I guess this one is. But I just think they're obvious. So that's why they're not my choice. I think, again, they probably go to the AFC Championship and lose. But that's why I have them as a red herring. Denver, again, it's Russell Wilson. They have a good team. they can be pitched as a Super Bowl team. He's been there, and they have a good defense. They've been playing good defense. So, especially if they go on a little bit of a winning streak in a division where obviously you have the Chiefs, but then they got the Raiders and the Chargers. If they can win those games, their second game against the Raiders, they have the Chargers this coming week, then they can certainly pitch Denver as a winning team. That being said, if you notice, I do have Denver finishing last in the division. I have the Chiefs first and Denver last. I think they're going to keep Denver close, but I just don't think they're going to keep them close enough. They might win a few in a row, but that's just what I have for now. Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers does this every year. He either gets in and then has a heartbreaking loss and everybody feels bad for him, or that he doesn't get in and it's like on the last week of the season, and that's been seldom. But I think it makes perfect sense for him to put over a guy like Hurts. Maybe he advances on Aaron, or he puts over Dak, because he put over Jimmy G last year, and we know he's not going to the Super Bowl. So the question becomes, who does he put over? I suppose he could meet Tom, but then neither of them are putting over anybody, so I don't think that makes too much sense. But they are now tied with their records, which happened earlier this season. So they might do something there. But I think he puts over, I'm going to say Dak. And then Tom, it's the same story. And this one I feel pretty strongly about, because I think Tom has a perfect candidate to put over. And that is going to be Jimmy G, his former backup. They are starting the Jimmy G narrative, a comeback narrative, comeback kid. Was going to get fired and benched and all this, and now he's leading his team to victory, and it just happens to be Brady's backup. So, and he's been to the Super Bowl, the heartbreak, so I do think, and if you watch the way he plays, they're really building a system around him to make it easy on him. So he's being painted, at least to me, as a Brady type. So I think Brady puts over Jimmy G. Rams, red herring. I do think they sneak in the playoffs to make it interesting. I just don't think they go too far. They'll probably get unceremoniously bumped, I think, early on. It could be by like Tampa, before Tampa puts over San Francisco or something like that. They might get bumped by San Francisco. That's a great narrative. I think a lot of people would bet on the Rams that game too, thinking, oh, it's been going back and forth. This time it's the Rams' turn. And San Francisco just washes them. So that's why I have the Rams as a red herring, and the Eagles, because they are not going to let Hurts win a championship this young. They just don't allow it. Brady is like the only outlier, and that was a weird set of circumstances. But even for him, it's not like he was just immediately given. Like he had some wins, and he won it. I think it was his second year. He was winning. I don't think he was a rookie, but he did get the Super Bowl win, and he got the 3 out of 4. But outside of him, there's never been a guy they've just, as a rookie or as a second-year pro, or even as like a third-year pro, really. Mahomes, I think, was 3-4 years in, and he had to pay his dues. So, and he's still paying his dues. So I just don't think they give Jalen Hurts a Super Bowl this year. That's why I have them as a red herring. And again, it's with their record, with everything they have, you're going to have a lot of people betting money on Philly. Here are the sleepers. So here are the teams that I think people have as basement dwellers, or just teams that they don't think are going to do anything, but I think they will. And we have Jacksonville, and I actually have Jacksonville finishing first in the South. To me, they're a spoiler team. Their fan base is more enthusiastic than they've ever been. I think they can really get behind Trevor Lawrence and some other players there. And to me, I know people like Derrick Henry and they like the Titans, and Tannehill's okay. I just think pushing Jacksonville makes more sense, especially if they can get behind Lawrence. They've been needing a draw for a quarterback. They finally got one. So I think Tannehill winds up putting him over, and Jacksonville gets in the playoffs as if they take that division. Then New Orleans, because I really like the Jameis versus the Bucs narrative. And in order for that to happen, they need to be close to the Bucs for when they play in prime time. So for that reason, I do have the Saints as sleepers. I'm not sure they get in the playoffs, but I think, again, they finish at least closer to 500 or even above 500 and just do better than people think. And the Raiders. The Raiders, because if you go on your sports book right now, you will see that they are getting better odds to win this Super Bowl than teams like the Colts I believe Titans. There's a lot of teams with 3-2 records. I think the Dolphins are just a little bit ahead of the Raiders, but they should not be where they're at. So Vegas knows something, and I'm not saying they'll win the Super Bowl, but they know that the Raiders are going to have a better season than what they've started as, and that they're probably going to finish with close to 7 or 8 wins. That's just what I believe, and that's why for the Raiders, I have them finishing better than the Broncos. I have them as 4. I have the Chiefs as first, and that brings us to our next category, which is going to be pretenders. These teams are this is close, I guess, close to red herrings, but they're teams that nobody really thinks they're going to win a Super Bowl anyway, but they're being pushed like, they're an X-Factor team, where I don't think they really are. One is Miami. They're just going to push Waddle and Hill, and they're going to use the Tua narrative as an excuse as to why they're not beating teams like the Vikings that they play next week. I'm not saying they're definitely losing that game. I'm just giving you an example, or why they lost to the Jets. All these different games they're losing. So I definitely think Miami's going to be a pretender where they just finish with a decent record. If they get in the playoffs, first round elimination, and they're going to be pushed though more than some other teams. Cincinnati fits that description because, like the Rams, they were in the Super Bowl, so people are going to remember that. They know they have Chase, they know they have Mixon, they know they have Burrow, so they're going to be considered all year long. I just don't think they win the division, and there's definitely a good chance that they might not even make the playoffs. They might want to push a team like the Chargers for the wild card instead, and we'll have to see. I think they might make the playoffs, but again, the difference here is these teams, people know they're not really going to go far, but they'll get pushed. Tennessee is another one. I think they're going to get pushed as much better than Jacksonville, and they should easily take the South, like them and the Colts. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the Colts will do all right. Like they might not finish with 3 or 4 wins, but same with the Titans. But I think it's going to come down to late in the season, and I think Jacksonville's going to wind up, they'll say stealing the division, but I think they will. And that'll most likely knock out both of these teams. It might leave one to make the playoffs. And then the last pretender I have is the Giants. I think that win in Green Bay is to get people really believing the Giants can do it, that Daniel Jones is the guy, and they're already talking about Odell Beckham Jr. returning, which, they're saying different teams, but the Giants are one of them. So I just think that they really want to do that to keep that division interesting, but they really are going to have it come down to the Cowboys and Eagles. I don't think the Giants were ever meant to be a threat in that division, but I think their idea was, hey, if we give them some wins early, then the Giants start off strong this year, and they'll seem stronger than most years. They were the last undefeated team, the Eagles weren't, but the Giants, I think before the Eagles, they were the last one to fall. So I just think they started them off 3-0. So if they go back and forth with wins and losses now, they can still be pitched as a top team that can get in the playoffs and do damage. But I think that those spots are reserved for the Cowboys and the Eagles. So then we get to in the hunt, and these are the teams that, again, they're kind of like pretenders. But again, I think these are teams that most of the public isn't thinking will make the playoffs, and I personally think they will. So I think the in the hunt squad basically is going to outperform the pretenders. Not every one of them, like Chicago or Seattle, but I think there's a good chance the Jets, the Chargers, Browns outperform the Dolphins, Bengals, and Titans. And for the reason being, they have to mix things up, and there has to be a couple spoilers. And I think Zach Wilson, they really want to push this Tua narrative. If they miss the playoffs because of this, then they'll be talking about it all offseason, which I'm sure they're going to do to find reasons to make up more rules that benefit their cheating. But the Jets maybe getting in the playoffs as a late seed, really, again, they're really going after the New York markets, and they're trying to push Wilson. Now, I'm not saying they do get in the playoffs, but I do have them finishing better in the division than most people do. I have them finishing right in second behind Buffalo. I think they're going to edge out the Dolphins. I think they're going to win again when they play that last game of the season. Everyone's expecting the Dolphins to take that serve back. I think the Jets win it. Then we got the Browns, and the Browns, I still have them behind the Bengals, but I think their records are going to be very close because they want to keep the narrative when Deshaun Watson comes back. This team has to be competitive. If they're 3 games below 500 when he comes back, they have nothing to push. But if they're only 1 game below 500 or they're 500 or better, now they can push. Oh, now they got Watson back. They can be real dangerous. So I think Cleveland, they have in the hunt here. I think basically all these teams, I think, are going to be, it's going to come down to the last week of the season or the week before they're eliminated. And I looked at a lot of their schedules too. The Chargers, another one. I think they're going to be in the hunt where more people are assuming a team like Tennessee might take that playoff spot. I think they might give it to Herbert. I think good chance we see Russell Wilson put him over this week coming up. It just makes sense to me. He is a good quarterback. They want to push him and Allen as a great tandem. So to me, I think the Chargers are an in the hunt team that people are going to take their eye off of, and they could definitely make it in the playoffs. And that's why I have them finishing here second ahead of the Raiders, only behind the Chiefs. And the Bears I have third in the division in the hunt. I think they're going to try and keep it interesting. I think they're going to keep this team at least close enough, like I said, so when they play weeks 13 through 17, when they're playing Minnesota, when they're playing Green Bay again, it just has more stakes, or NFC teams in general. I don't think they're going to have the Bears start off like the Commanders, even though they have the same records now. I think the Commanders finish with a much worse record than the Bears. I think they give the Bears a little bit of a run, let people get hyped behind Fields. And then Seattle, just because they always seem to be kind of lurking around. And at home, they always try and portray them as a good team. So over Arizona, I do like Seattle a little more. They don't have a basketball market, and the Mariners are about to get eliminated. So I think it makes more sense. The Suns are around the corner for Arizona, on the other hand, and you got more colleges, successful colleges. So I just think it makes more sense to have Seattle stay in the hunt versus Arizona. That's why I do have in this division them finishing third. Now you see I have the Rams second because I think they're a red herring, and I have San Francisco as first. And that leaves the last category in plain sight. And I think these teams are going to quietly have consistent seasons. They're obviously going to improve. They'll make the playoffs as a mid-seed, and I think they're going to wind up surprising people. So these are my Super Bowl picks. Obviously, there's 4 of them here, and 3 are in the same conference. But my first Super Bowl pick is the 49ers. I think the Jimmy comeback story makes perfect sense. I think he just fits all the criteria for a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and that team just makes sense. He even joked about it being like a movie or something, or how it'd be a great movie if he won. So I really, really like him. And I think Dallas and Minnesota do very well. I think they're in plain sight teams who just basically keep doing what they do, is stacking up wins. The other in plain sight's Baltimore. While they are acknowledging that Lamar Jackson is shattering records, they're not talking about him enough. What he is doing is nothing short of spectacular. Again, rigged or not rigged. So as their defense tightens up a little bit, they have a couple guys coming back from injury. I think they start to push the narrative that Baltimore is a team to be reckoned with. And again, they're not a team that people are saying can't make the playoffs or can't make the Super Bowl, but they're not being talked about like the Bucs or the Chiefs or the Bills. So the Ravens are a team I really like. When Tony Saragusa died and a few other Ravens, I had a theory that maybe they were going to have a good season. So Baltimore, San Francisco is who I like for the Super Bowl. It hasn't really changed. I wasn't sure as much about the NFC until I started seeing this Jimmy G story unfold. And they're giving them a defense and an offensive line very akin to early 2000 Ravens when you had the successful Patriots. Really, where they're just such a well-rounded team that they're going to be a perfect, they are deep. They can just explain easily away how this team goes to the Super Bowl. So that's all of my categories for all of my teams here. Dallas and Minnesota, like I said, I think they have good teams. They're in plain sight. I think towards the end of the season, people start believing that they have a chance of winning the Super Bowl. I just don't think it's their year. So yeah, we got Buffalo, in my opinion, Philly on the other side. I think both number 2s get in the playoffs, Jets, Cowboys. Jacksonville. We got Bucks on the other side. The Saints, another possibility of getting in. Winston versus Bucks writes itself. And I do have Baltimore edging out Cincinnati. And I have Green Bay edging out Minnesota. I think Green Bay is a perfect team to give that first round bye to. Because then Aaron I feel like he could the first week we'll see like 2 good teams go at it, and then Aaron will put over whoever wins that game. And then Chargers, I think, get in the playoffs. I do. I think that they want to get Herbert in there. Rams are going to get in. I just think they lose to the Niners in the first round or something. And on the AFC side, I think Kansas City takes the first round bye as well. Probably meets, like I said, in the division, Buffalo. And I think they win again. And then in the championship, I can definitely see Lamar knocking them out. But I wanted to go more into the narratives of the teams and why I think each team fits these categories. And I hope you guys enjoy it. It might help you with your picks, and it's going to help us with our metrics going forward, knowing which teams should definitely do better against the spread. Because, again, usually the teams that do really poorly against the spread are the teams that finish as the bottom, the basement dwellers. And the ones that finish great against the spread are the ones that finish with good records. So it's not always the case, but you're not going to see a playoff team 25% against the spread. So that really helps us. So take care, everyone. I hope you really enjoyed this. I wanted to make this where it wasn't all over the place, but where you could kind of categorize it and see where my mind was at with this. And happy earnings.